Did you know my husband?
No, I didn't, Mrs. Warren.
Of course not. He died years before you came here. You're a little like him. Firm step, strong hand, good eyes.
Thank you. I know you were very fond of him.
He told me I wasn't as beautiful as his first wife, but I was a much better shot. The only kind of beauty he had any respect for was strength. And he had 2 sons, both weaklings. They hated guns and hunting. He used to run away from them, Dr. Perry. Well, he got his release, a bottle. He died as he lived, happily, extravagantly.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you mustn't be. You mustn't be sorry for him.
You should try to get some rest, Mrs. Warren.
Yes, I know. I talk too much. I talk too much.
The Spiral Staircase tells the story of a series of stranger murders happening in a small town in Vermont in 1906. The bulk of the action is set in an old dark house during a storm, where convalescing matriarch Mrs. Warren is tended to by a companion, the protagonist, Helen, who can't speak due to a childhood trauma. The staff includes a housekeeper, a handyman, and a nurse. Mrs. Warren's adult sons, the roguish Stephen Warren and bookish Professor Albert Warren, round out the household. In the local village, a killer has struck 3 times, each time attacking a woman with a disability. This makes Helen a potential victim, much to the concern of Dr. Perry, who's courting her and attempting to cure her.
You know the words to that tune?
As the storm rages outside, the unseen killer's presence is felt in the house. The spiral staircase of the title is a winding staircase that's used throughout by the staff to travel between the upper floors of the manor and the basement. For the most part, the characters travel along the master staircase, wide, grand, and of sharp geometry. The master staircase also serves as a prominent backdrop to scenes set in the foyer. The space of the manor is at times deceptive to such a degree that the spiral staircase becomes an expressionistic double of the master, a suggestion of the film's oniric qualities. The spiral staircase, as a bent mirror to the master staircase, is a literal manifestation of the distorting visions that haunt the film.
You looked in this mirror once before today. I watched you. You had no mouth then, just as you have none now. Look at yourself. Look!
In the opening scenes at an inn, a crowd gathers to watch a silent movie, while upstairs, a limping woman dresses. An unseen figure, unseen but for his eye, lurks inside her closet. The killer's vision becomes central to the atmosphere and themes of the film, for it bears a deeply distorted perspective. The killer is a eugenicist, believing that those with disabilities must be killed as a means of cleansing the world. By setting its story in the first years of the long 20th century, in the still pastoral splendor of a modernizing American village, the film occupies a unique vantage point from which to declare essential American values. Made in the immediate wake of the Holocaust, the spiral staircase implicitly rejects the killer, and by extension, eugenics, as anti-American. The killer's homicidal ableism is affected on screen through the use of anthropomorphic distortion in the first scene that seems to stretch the victim's figure so that she stands tall and stiff. Later, when the killer spies on Helen, he sees her as mouthless. The killer's vision is both symbolic and dehumanizing. The film's identification with the vision of the killer might be cited to support the theory put forth by Borde and Chaumeton in Panorama du film noir américain, which argues in part that the noir aesthetic of deep and unnatural shadows is a criminal's perspective of the world, or at least one that reflects that world's barbarism. This argument is commonly supported by the occasional happy endings that feature in film noir, that offer that, with the criminal element vanquished, the world might become less stylized. The spiral staircase features such an ending, when the killer is dead, and a spotlight shines on Helen as she weeps, a clearing of the clouds. Here, this criminal perspective is especially literal, and anticipates a thread that runs through the thrillers that would follow it. In particular, the Giallo films of the 1960s and 70s, and the slasher films of the 1970s and 80s, that would often employ a subjective camera to place the viewer in the perspective of an unseen killer. In the reverse shot, director Robert Siodmak's own eyes are used as the killer's, a means of concealing the killer's identity among the players, but also a clear statement that responsibility for the violence and cruelty of this story rests with the filmmaker, a gesture that would recur in filmmaker Dario Argento's frequent cameos, standing in for the hands of the killers in his own films. The extreme close-ups on Siodmak's iris exemplifies the formal estrangement of film noir style. It demonstrates what Janie Place and Lowell Peterson have called the unsettling variations on traditional shots common to noir. The extreme close-up on the human eye, and the eye's use as a framing site for action, was anticipated a decade earlier in Slavko Vorkapich's The Furies, an opening montage that he made for the feature drama Crime Without Passion, where the eye in the spiral staircase is used to frame the disturbed vision of the killer. The eye in The Furies finds an immediate plastic parallel, framing the barrel of a gun.
You know, Stephen, you always did smirk, even when you were a child. It's one of the things my father disliked about you.
He was my father, too. You know, I'm inclined to think that Father was disappointed in both of us. Neither of us fitted his concept of what a real man should be, a gun-toting, hard-drinking, tough-living, God-fearing citizen. He always used to say, the strong survived, the weak died. How wrong he was, Albert. Because you and I, the meek, have inherited the earth.
The absent, long-dead Warren patriarch is referenced throughout as an emblem of virile masculinity, and his sons are characterized as a disappointment to his standards of manhood. The carousing Stephen, the effete intellectual Albert. In the final act, the killer is revealed to be Albert, suggesting that the killer was not only on a lunatic moral crusade, but a hypocritical one, as an outcast in his own right.
You locked him up downstairs.
Albert Warren represents the ruling moral order of his father, an inheritance of venom mutated by his own narcissism and torment into something even more volatile and monstrous.
Because I purposed it.
The opening scene, in the silent movie house, establishes not only the era of the film, but Helen's vision of how the world views her. The characters on screen, moving their mouths in animated exchanges, but with no words sounding.
And keep him in sickness and in health, and forsaking all others, keep thee only unto him, so long as...
There is in all of this only one glimpse of Helen's interior world, a fantasy in which she imagines dancing with Dr. Perry in the foyer of the great house, in what becomes a strange wedding ceremony, the Warren family among the guests, ending with the devastating moment when the Reverend asks her to say, "I do."
Say I do. Say I do. Say I do. Say I do. Say I do.
Like so many protagonists of noir cinema, Helen has been stripped of her agency, stripped of the primary instrument of her free will, but where other protagonists might spend a movie recovering their free will, her recovery seems, at best, a faint and distant hope. In the final moments, as a result of shock, Helen regains her voice. While this is a reprieve for her from the torment of her condition, it also draws her nearer to meeting the standards of the Warren patriarch. No longer an outsider, no longer disabled, no longer exceptional, she becomes, much as the killer saw himself, like everyone else.
Dr. Perry, come. It's I, Helen.